Board members, we are now about to start our monthly work session, our June 16th work session for the Gwinnett County Board of Education. So we would like to now turn the meeting over to our interim superintendent, Dr. Al Taylor, for the first agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Therese, and good afternoon, everyone. At this time, we will have Dr. Nicole White, Interim Chief Learning Officer, and Dr. Emily Cody, Director of Program Development and Improvement, provide our first update. Dr. White.
Thank you. Today, we are presenting the Review Committee's recommendation regarding the revised charter petition submitted by Achievement Preparatory Academy. The board is asked to consider and vote on the committee's recommendation at this Thursday's June business meeting. This presentation consolidates information previously shared with you during this month's board briefings, along with supporting documents to ensure the board has the necessary context to make an informed decision. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Cody.
As a reminder, Achievement Preparatory Academy, or APA, submitted its original charter petition by the December 18th, 2025 deadline, ensuring eligibility for consideration during this 2026 review cycle. At the March business meeting, the board voted unanimously to permit APA to revise and resubmit its petition with specific direction to strengthen key areas, including the budget, academic program, and community engagement. The petitioner is a current GCPS staff member. To uphold the integrity and partiality of the review process, we have engaged qualified external reviewers during both phases of the evaluation. To support the board's review and decision-making, the following materials have been provided. First, the formal revision request issued to APA. Next, the final recommendation report developed in partnership with our lead external reviewer, Gina Post, director at the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, or NACSA. The pre-opening checklist, a standard requirement for all newly approved charter schools during their first year. This document is modeled after NACSA's recommended pre-opening criteria and outlines specific action requirements identified during the review process. This document will directly inform the MOU or charter contract we will engage with if APA is approved. Next, we also have included APA's intent to enroll documentation as to date, along with community letters of support. A memo detailing the current law regarding the district's responsibilities for oversight, including the opening and closing of locally approved charter schools. And finally, a formal letter from the State Charter Schools Commission of Georgia outlining the district's current standing with respect to Senate Bill 82. Achievement Preparatory Academy proposes to serve students in kindergarten through 5th grade in the Duluth, Norcross, and Meadow Creek communities, which the petitioner identifies as underserved within the district. The school would open with a phased model, beginning with grades K through 3 and adding one grade level each year. Projected enrollment is 200 students in year 1, growing to a full capacity of 475. The academic model centers on early access to CTE pathways, including STEM and entrepreneurship, delivered through project-based learning and hands-on experiences. The central question our review committee undertook was to answer whether or not the revised petition substantiates this proposed vision. The required revisions focused on strengthening the academic model, establishing a viable financial plan, and providing clear, compelling evidence of community demand within the proposed service areas. Our review found that APA had developed a project-based learning model informed by research with an implementation plan, aligned staffing plan, and specialized services to ensure each and every student will be served. APA has revised its budget to reflect a realistic and aligned financial plan, and it includes competitive teacher compensation and identified funding sources. The proposal is financially feasible, contingent upon meeting certain key pre-opening conditions, such as securing a facility in one of their 3 target clusters, meeting enrollment targets, and finalizing secured funding sources. Finally, APA has strengthened its demonstration of community demand with 116 documented intent to enroll forms and 58 letters of support from families and community stakeholders. The board is required to take action at the June business meeting, as state law mandates a decision on charter petition for this year's review cycle must be done by June 30th. At that meeting, the review committee requests that the board affirm its recommendation to approve Achievement Preparatory Academy's revised petition. We stand ready for questions.
Board members, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman, Dr. Therese, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. I have a series of questions, starting with how we got to this point. I know that the presentation references Senate Bill 82, and I'm on slide 2 of the presentation. So Senate Bill 82, which became law in 2025, can you explain in plain terms what Senate Bill 82, specifically what it does to provide, what does it provide to districts that approve charter petitions, and what are the consequences for districts that deny them?
Great question. It does provide for up to 3 schools, the first 3 districts to approve a petition in the review cycle, $250,000 for up to 3 years to help support any new school that opens. The consequence, or the stick, as the writer of the bill has framed it, is that if we deny a petition that is subsequently approved by the State Commission 3 times within our Swiss waiver year, which we're currently at the beginning of ours, that we would be ineligible to apply for a Swiss waiver at the next period of time.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Just to clarify, that Senate Bill 82 offers, and per lines 149 to 174 of the bill, a $250,000 incentive grant to local boards of education that approve new local charters. And then in exchange for denying petitions that are subsequently approved by the State Charter Schools Commission, districts lose or forfeit flexibility waivers such as Swiss.
Correct.
For up to 3 years. So my next question is around GCPS's exposure. So GCPS currently holds a strategic waiver school system contract with the state. And so under Senate Bill 82, can you explain the specific mechanism by which GCPS could lose that contract and what closing it would mean operationally for the district?
I will defer to maybe some other members of Executive Cabinet just to make sure that we're very precise in our language of the impact.
I'm not aware of specific guidelines that have been issued by the DOE or the charter petition stating what specific methods they will use. My understanding of Senate Bill 82 is that if you have, for lack of better words, 3 strikes against you, then the Charter School Commission, the DOE, can withhold your Swiss waiver, and they have flexibility of what portions of those Swiss waiver they want to withhold. They have not created or disseminated a specific set of guidelines for districts to take a look at that, around that issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordon. So regarding the petitioner's application, if denied and subsequently approved by the SCSC, the State Charter Schools Commission, the second denial, that is one step closer to triggering the consequence as outlined in Senate Bill 82?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And so I'll ask this directly. Has the possibility of losing the Swiss contract under Senate Bill 82 played any role in the recommendation to approve the petitioner's revised petition?
No, but we have included the information so that you have full context of what is happening with the changes in charter authorization. We approached the revision review through a lens of how could we get this TS, what is an absolute barrier to partnership, and what is not actually a barrier, but something that we could work with to get that school opened in time for students in August 2027.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. My next question is around process and history. Just want to make sure I have the timeline correct. In March, the External Review Committee recommended denial of the petition's charter application, citing legal insufficiencies in academics, community need, demand, engagement, and finance. So the External Committee also found the petition irreparable for the 2026 petition cycle. Is that accurate?
That was the finding of our external reviewers corroborated with our internal district leadership team at that time, and that was what was presented to the board in March.
Okay, thank you. And so subsequently, this board voted to allow the petitioner to revise and submit, the petitioner did, shortly after the State Charter Schools Commission sent us a letter reminding us of our obligations under Senate Bill 82. And I just want to draw the board's attention to the category where the petitioner previously demonstrated legal insufficiencies, particularly in the areas of community need, demand, and engagement. And in that same category, the revised application includes letters of support from a state association committed to charter school expansion and from a state lawmaker who co-sponsored Senate Bill 82, the law that penalizes this district for saying no and incentivizes us with grants if we say yes. And I am citing the final recommendation report, and which stated that because of all of these letters of support, endorsements, it resulted in a broad base of community backing. And just want to make sure that that was clarified and brought out before I move on to my next question, which is related to the External Review Committee.
Absolutely.
So as I mentioned earlier, an External Review Committee reviewed the petitioner's charter application. So who sits on the External Review Committee, and what qualifies them to assess whether a community has demonstrated genuine unmet demand for a new school?
That's a great question. So we had 3 external reviewers in that initial phase. So this would be the first time we've had a 2-part or 2 phases of evaluation. This is the first time we've done a revise and resubmit. So in that initial evaluation, which followed our typical process, we did engage with 3 external reviewers. 2 of them came from the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, and their resumes were provided in March for that work session. Our 3rd reviewer came at the recommendation of the State Charter Commission and as a managing director with Teach for America in Atlanta, so had that Metro Atlanta context as well. Her resume was also provided in March for that work session. These individuals have had backgrounds either directly with NACSA, which is considered the gold standard of charter school authorizing, or has had experience, as in the case with our reviewer from Teach for America, who has participated in the state commission process for those who apply for a state charter.
Okay, thank you. And I now want to transition to the motion for Thursday. So as we prepare, so the motion for Thursday is to approve a startup charter school application. So I have a few questions about where we are as a district. How many startup charter petitions has GCPS received in the last 4 years?
In the last 4 years, we've received 3 startup petitions.
Okay. And does GCPS currently have a charter school?
We do. We have New Life Academy, which is actually entering its 20th year of operation, and they typically have a waiting list. We conduct an in-house lottery for them to make sure that students are able to get the seats, but they're typically oversubscribed, meaning that they have a larger demand than they have seats.
Okay, perfect. And so you mentioned the charter school has been in operation for 20 years.
Yes, ma'am.
And how is it performing academically?
It's performing pretty much on average with our other schools, with actually big gains in math and reading in their elementary grades. They also have had high MTSS implementation fidelity as well, as we've done our school visits over the course of this past year, and myself in partnership with Cluster Superintendent Dr. Melissa Walker.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And if this board approves this application on Thursday, would this be the first startup charter GCPS has ever authorized?
Not the first one ever.
Okay. And if it's not the first, would we, if this board votes to approve this current or uphold the recommendation, are we prepared for what comes next?
It's a great question. My Office of Program Development and Improvement does oversee the charter school authorization. I think one thing to clarify is that charter school authorization is not just yes or no on the petition. Authorization is the full life cycle of the charter. So we are shifting and restructuring within that office to ensure that we're upholding kind of this new role, this new future of authorizing here in Georgia, because the context has shifted over the last couple of years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I want to go back to make reference to Senate Bill 82, which I've referenced. If a local Board of Education the size of GCPS denies 3 charter petitions that are then subsequently approved by the State Charter Schools Commission, the district loses its flexibility waivers, such as Swiss, for up to 3 years. Does the state require local boards of education to use a specific rubric when evaluating local charter petition applications?
Absolutely. That was actually an addition from Senate Bill 82. So this was the first year, again, in that initial evaluation where we used the state-approved rubric. We have always had a rubric that was informed by the commission and by NACSA, but it was something that we had created in-house. It's not largely different from the new state rubric, but it was a new tool for us this year. Another reason we leveraged our external reviewers, they helped model the process with this new rubric.
All right, perfect. And you mentioned that GCPS has a local rubric. It is semi-aligned with the state's rubric. The state has provided a rubric. So is the 2026 cycle the first time that GCPS has used the state
That is correct.
rubric? Okay. And has the State Charter Schools Commission provided any training or guidance to GCPS on how to apply that rubric?
Not as of today.
And finally, has the State Charter Schools Commission received and reviewed the same revised application that is before the board today and on Thursday?
Another great question. No, they have the original petition. We have offered to provide the revised petition as we wanted to partner with them as we've created this new precedent. And they said at this time it was not the time, if you will, to see the new revised petition. However, either way that the board votes on Thursday, we will provide that, whether it's approved or denied, we will provide the revised petition to the commission along with all other required legal documentation of the process.
Okay, thank you. So just to make sure I understand, in 4 years, GCPS has only received 3 startup petitions. Our one charter school has been operating for 20 years and is performing. If this board upholds a recommendation on Thursday, this will be the first time GCPS has ever authorized a startup?
Not ever, but I would say at least since in the last 4 years, this would be our first startup petition.
Okay. And then we're using a rubric for the first time without confirmed training from the state on how to apply it?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. My next question is around GCPS and what we have in our, or the programs that we offer in our existing schools. So for the sake of time, just want to highlight or draw attention to the district website around charter petitions, that they should focus on innovative and effective student learning opportunities that do not duplicate existing GCPS programs or exist in any GCPS school. When I reviewed the documents, the petitioner proposed CTAE integration at the elementary level, STEM, entrepreneurship, agricultural, food, and natural resources, project-based learning, field experiences, community mentoring, and the science of reading. I just want to speak to, again, as a single board member representing District 1, I know that the Archer Cluster elementary students have access to agricultural STEM pathways. Harbins Elementary and Cooper Elementary have chickens.
Yes.
Lovin Elementary, a STEM certified school showcased by the USDA, runs a composting program that won a $30,000 grant and maintains active partnerships with beekeepers, Mercer University, and the University of Georgia. In the Mountain View cluster, Freeman's Mill Elementary offers a computer science program where kindergartners are coding, available to every K through 5 student across many career pathways. And then recently, the Governor's Office of Student Achievement recognized Freeman Mills Elementary as a highest performing school based on a 3-year average of content mastery, closing gap scores on the CCRPI. And then lastly, in the South Gwinnett cluster, Rosewood Elementary offers STEM robotics. It is to my understanding that GCPS is implementing the science of reading across the district, field trips, project-based learning. So my question is, what specifically does the charter petition propose that a student living in the Duluth, Meadow Creek, or Norcross cannot already access somewhere in GCPS today?
I think it's a question about access. So those families in Norcross, Duluth, and Meadow Creek, are they able to access programs that you've mentioned in the Mountain View cluster or in the Archer cluster? And so they're attempting, in their petition, they're proposing to attempt to integrate that in. Of course, we have computer science for all in all of our schools, K-12. We also have green and healthy schools in those 3 clusters as well who do project-based learning, hands-on experiences. I think 2 things that are distinct with their petition that would have it stand out compared to district schools. One is the integration of the Georgia CTAE pathways from kindergarten through 5th grade outside of CS, outside of computer science. The second is that they are proposing strong community partnerships where they would bring in community members in to mentor students, have externships and field trips that would be very specific to entrepreneurship. And to your point, we do see that in many schools in those 3 clusters as well, and of course across all of our district.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that information.
Thank you.
I have a last bucket of questions for the sake of time. It's around enrollment. I know that the revised petition, the petitioner secured 116 documented Gwinnett County residents and 58 letters of support. At our March 2026 budget work session, the data showed enrollment declining in Meadow Creek, Duluth, and Norcross due to a variety of reasons, namely like out-migration. And then the presentation noted that almost all annual growth rates declined. The petitioner proposes to open serving K through 3 students in exactly this geography at roughly half its intended enrollment. Can you shed light on why why the recommendation is opening a new school in declining or continued projected declining enrollment zones?
Another great question. With this authorization process, this evaluation of the petition, we're taking the information that APA has provided to us, so directly coming from those community members, those families who have signed intent to enroll forms or have submitted letters of support. So that is our main source. We do not calculate the enrollment trends for the district as a formal mechanism to compute whether enrollment will hit the targets that we need to for APA, but our sole source is really what does APA provide to us about what they're hearing directly from the community.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Doe.
Wow, I like that. That was enjoyable. A lot of good information there, a lot of good questions. Has the environment within which we're operating changed a little bit in the last couple of years?
Yes, sir.
And I'm specifically referring to the legislation regarding promise schools. So how many promise schools are in the geographical area that this school is proposing to operate?
I do not want to misquote, so I would defer to someone who has more expertise in this. I do know there's a handful, but again, I do not want to misquote. Is there anyone?
Anyone have any?
I don't have the exact number, but it's probably close to between 6 and 10 possibly. Maybe not that high, but within that cluster, probably somewhere around there. I can get that information for you.
Because they could attract from even outside those 3 clusters. That's the primary target. And what has changed in terms of what the state is allowing families to do concerning children who are in a promise school?
So if they are in a promise school, they can apply for a promise scholarship, also known as a voucher, where they can use that to enroll in a private school, use it for, I believe, after-school tutoring, other types of educational, but the biggest one would be to unenroll from that school, a promise school, and use the funds to enroll in a private school.
Right. And we wouldn't necessarily agree with parents that they're getting something better removing a child from GCPS, but we're not making that decision for them. That's a decision they're making as a family, correct?
Yes.
And in that situation, there's no taxpayer dollars from the county. None of the county funds that we bring in follow those students if they leave GCPS. The local funding.
That's my understanding, but Chief Mallard?
Currently, that's not the situation. We have state QBE funding, obviously, so formula funding, and obviously, federal grant funding could be, depending on free and reduced meal rates, they could also be entitled to that federal funding and individuals with disabilities funding. So, yeah.
Okay. So we have a charter school that wants to operate under GCPS that potentially captures many of these students whose families might choose to remove them from those schools and give them a slightly different opportunity. Not different from what you might find all across the county if you were able to access programs in Archer or Lanier or wherever, which of course would be a physical impossibility to try to have your kid attend all of those different programs in different places because of the choice that our local schools can make. So it's a different environment, and we have the opportunity to potentially keep a number of those students under the GCPS umbrella.
That's correct.
Okay. And in reviewing, following the board's approval to allow them to pull more information, did the proposed start date change in this?
No,
No.
it did not. The year zero, as we like to call it, that first year, so if you all were to approve this 2026, 2027 school year would be considered their year zero, where they would not have students they're building operationally. They've always would be open to schools, or excuse me, to students August 2027. So the start date hasn't changed. That's just the typical process for any startup.
Okay. So they've got 18, well, yeah, not quite 15 months maybe, to continue to grow the interest and the different things that are going on. And that brings up one other question around promise schools. When does that change from the state trigger? Is that this fall that a family could choose to remove a student from GCPS?
That is my understanding.
Is that?
So
Okay.
the schools that are on the list for the 26-27 school year, families can initiate that now for next school year.
Yes.
Okay. So really, it's this year, and then even going into the following year, that families in the area, if they so choose, would be looking for alternatives. Okay. So we have the opportunity to keep students under the GCPS umbrella in ways that, again, are not specifically offered in those clusters, creative, different, and there's going to be the opportunity for them to identify families based upon those families' decisions. We would retain all county funding for those schools, for our schools, so we might actually end up with lower class sizes and more dollars to spend on GCPS students, while at the same time allowing parents and families to choose a different opportunity for their children and still stay under the umbrella of GCPS.
That is a perspective that is aligned with the reality, yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks for all the hard work you've put into this, and I appreciate your expertise in this. You've been able to answer every question well, off the top of your head. Very impressive.
Yeah, great work tonight answering the series of questions that have been presented, and thank you for your insight on this. I don't have a whole lot of questions, but I have a couple, just a couple comments. I think this is a a great program, a great need in this area of Duluth, Norcross, and Meadow Creek, especially for our younger students, K through 5, and immersing them in this great program of STEM. It's so needed, and I do support the community in terms of their letters that they provided to us. I do have a question around the letters of support, because I noticed quite a few of them came from outside of that area. Do we know how the Achievement Preparatory Academy went about soliciting that support? What did they use to do that?
I do understand that they've hosted many in-person and social events since they received the revise and resubmit. I also understand that they hosted an in-person event even just last week at the 1818 Club. So they're doing a mix of outreach virtually to reach all families and in person so that they can build some relationships. But more than that, I don't know the details, but that is my understanding from what they've presented. And honestly, what I've seen advertised on social media or LinkedIn, they are using those networks as well.
Because I certainly no doubt agree that, pardon me, that the need from within the community is certainly there. I was intrigued to see that the letters also included from, well outside of the area as well. And then, kind of my final thoughts. Obviously, this is a charter school. Are they? And I probably already know the answer to this question, but I don't know if they've even thought about it. Are there going to be any additional, transportation needs? I know Ms. Stone had some good questions around, some already existing solutions in her area that students can access in terms of transportation. Is this academy putting that, any thought into any outside additional transportation for students that may want to come in to this academy from other far reaches of our district?
Currently, it's not part of their budget.
Okay.
So that's the reality of it today. Of course, as things change, it is their right. If that is something that they're able to financially afford, or that is what the need and the community asks for, then it would be up to APA to secure that transportation and fund it. Take care of all the transportation routes, everything that we do for our current district schools. This APA would be responsible for all of that.
Do they see themselves stretching past that 475 capacity number?
I'm not sure, only because what they have presented is what we have to take at face value.
Understood.
So yes, I will say New Life Academy was a K-5 for many, many years
Right.
and just expanded to 6th, 7th, and 8th. So it has been done before with charter schools where they have expanded.
Right, okay. All right, no further questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Cody, for all the information provided thus far. A lot of my questions have been answered as a result of the previous questioning, so I appreciate the insight. Just to follow up on a couple of things, to confirm transportation will not be provided. Did they budget for transportation at all?
No.
It was not budgeted for. Do we know if they are, just thinking back to the decline in enrollment question, that was going to be one of my questions as well, if that's considered or not? It sounds like it's not considered. Do we know where they were planning, which facility? Are they planning to use an already constructed facility? Are they planning to build a new facility? Any thought there?
Yeah, that's a great question. They've presented 3 already built facilities in those communities. That was part of the revision process. We have included, and I believe it's document 3 for you all, the pre-opening criteria. That's actually the first benchmark they have to meet with us, is that they have secured a facility in one of the communities, whether Meadow Creek, Norcross, or Duluth. So that's the first, is settling in on one of those. They have shared with us that they're waiting on the approval to be able to move forward, whether that's from us or from the state.
How do we go about, well, let me back up. Have we previously approved a charter that has since shut down, and can you share context as to why, if so?
From my understanding, and I will share that I've been with the district less than 4 years, so the process that I know very well is the one that I started 4 years ago. I know of we have completely closed down locally approved charter schools in the past. We've also reabsorbed, that's our most recent closure, which is North Metro Academy of Performing Arts. That was a locally approved charter, and when they needed the support, rather than closing it down or terminating that charter, we absorbed it as a full district school while allowing it to still maintain its identity as a performing arts school, meeting that community need.
So it was proposed to shut down that particular school. It was going to shut down.
So before my time here, it was, from my understanding, and anyone else can jump in, my understanding is that there were conversations that the school was not performing or meeting the benchmarks that it was required to perform. So rather than terminating it and closing down the school and having the students go back to their home schools, we absorbed that school as a full district school rather than maintaining its charter. So it's still in existence, but it is under the purview of this board and district leadership.
recall.
Meaning that now that we've absorbed it, the student count is under GCPS and we have funding to support those students that we didn't have when it was a charter. Is that correct?
I don't know about the funding. I would refer to Chief because I don't want to misquote, but the funds follow the students back with us, so just like an FTE count.
So I'm trying to get at how we are planning to hold the charter school accountable,
Yes.
and if they are not successful, what those implications are for us as a county.
Absolutely. That's a great question. So we are in our purview if a charter school, whether it's APA or New Life even after 20 years or any future charter, that if they're not meeting benchmarks every year that they have set out to provide to those communities, to those students, then we would come back to the board for a decision, and that could be termination. Termination of a charter is obviously a last resort, but it is an option for us. And I will note as well that currently as the law stands, we are not penalized in the same way around like we are in Senate Bill 82. So that is our role as the local authorizer if a charter school does not uphold its charter petition with us.
Dr. Cody, can you also just speak to the MOU that we're
Yes.
planning to develop and how that will be captured as well?
Absolutely. So we would enter into a charter contract with APA or, again, any other charter petition that we approve in the future. So that would be a legally binding contract, just like we have MOUs with any of our other external partners. The pre-opening checklist that has been provided for you will directly inform that MOU. My office would be the accountability arm of that MOU and would provide oversight to ensure that they're meeting benchmarks, whether it's in this pre-opening year, this year zero, or in the future as they have students. We currently have that partnership with New Life Academy as well.
So does that MOU include meeting benchmarks around student enrollment?
That is correct.
Does it consider if students enroll and then withdraw? Because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, if they enroll and then withdraw, we won't recapture that funding, or would we recapture the funding if those students come back to GCPS schools?
We would recapture that funding if they come back to a GCPS, a district GCPS school. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Dr. Treese.
Thank you, board members, for your questions. Many of my questions have also been asked, in particular regarding the area, Meadow Creek cluster, Promise school areas. And I have just some overarching comments. One is I do see a systemic agenda related to defunding of our public education in various ways, from vouchers to charters to some other things that are even defunding our Department of Education from the federal and not fully funding our state schools and not updating the QBE formula, which there was an opportunity to do that in the last session, and that didn't happen. So I consistently see a pattern of not fully funding our public education, and I am a supporter of fully funding public schools. I also have a both-and perspective. I also know that the opportunity we need to give to our students around access to quality education and opportunities for them to be able to thrive is really important. And my wondering is, GCPS has offerings in our schools. We have a new superintendent coming. We have charged our new superintendent to really focus on areas of opportunity and closing gaps. And I think that we need to really examine and give time for that opportunity to see what is possible. I think that the idea around educating our students and providing them with entrepreneurial skills at a young age and the CTA opportunities are really, it's really innovative. And I know some of the things about charter schools is you have to create something that is not already existing in the district. So it seems to me that we do have some things existing in the district, and I know that there are also opportunities to do better, in particular in the at-promise school zones, which many of them are located in District 5, in the Meadow Creek cluster in particular. And so I do think that there are some opportunities, and I'm hopeful that with our leadership, that the new leadership, that we will be able to really focus on what are some areas of opportunity. We have an equity audit study that's coming up, and I'm also looking forward to really examining what will be the results of that study, and then seeing, well, what is existing in our school system in terms of what's existing and then what's missing. And based on what is missing, I think there is an opportunity for us to then invest in those schools that are already existing. This facility, my understanding, is 200 people capacity, right? 200 students.
Just in the first year
In
of
the first
operation.
year.
Yes, ma'am.
And so we have already in this area a decline in enrollment. In Meadow Creek and Norcross area in particular, I know those two areas. And so now with the kind of complexity around the decline in enrollment, I also think that that is something that is concerning for me. So I'm just, and these are just comments around some of the things that, as I look at the proposal, as I recall looking at the facilities, I had some concerns about the facilities. I still have those concerns around the facilities. I don't know which facility it is. I know there are capacity constraints based on the size of the facility. There were different square footage of the facilities, and based on the square footage, I know that also limits the number of students you can have in the building. So I'm still curious about that. I know that it's contingent upon approval to figure out which facility. And I do think it's important that it's an important factor, frankly, in terms of enrollment. So those are just some greater concerns. But specifically, when we talk about equity, access, and opportunity, transportation is a huge issue in the Meadow Creek cluster right now in GCPS. Many of our students don't participate in after-school programs. Many of them don't participate in sports. Some of it is due for financial reasons. Some of it is due to lack of transportation. And when we are saying that this is a school that's available to students, how are students going to get there? So what I see being created is a system where there's a system of the privileged system of the students who have the opportunity to be able to have the transportation to get there. And then you have the other system of students who don't have the transportation, and they'll continue to be in our schools. Not that they won't have their needs met. We have to figure out that part. But there is public investment and public transportation that will get them to that school. And so my concern is that it could have an unintended consequence around segregation, whether it's income related, right? Opportunity related, privilege related, right? And so I think that the people who will have the opportunity for transportation will benefit from the school, and the other kids that continue to be marginalized will continue to be marginalized. I am here, and I've always been here, for addressing and closing gaps and meeting the needs of the most marginalized child. And I think that we have an opportunity in our existing system and our public funding that we can do, in the new leadership that is coming, for us to really examine, and the equity audit, to really examine what is missing and how we can figure out within our existing system how we can meet the needs of our students. So you already answered questions around the impact of enrollment. You answered questions around gaining support. So one of the questions I had in particular was New Life Academy, 20 years, successful, still operating. One of the other things about charter schools is that you have to generally outperform schools in your surrounding community. So that is why some of the schools we have that we absorbed ended up kind of closing in a way because they did not perform. North Metro Academy, in particular, I can't remember if there was a leader. Who was that person? Who was in charge of North Metro Academy?
I was not in employment
Yeah.
here.
Rodriguez Johnson.
Okay. Oh,
That's correct.
okay. Okay. So we have data on why the school did not perform, and we decided to roll them in. I remember that distinctly, and I remember having to be a part of that process and vote on absorbing this school. I was really excited because it was a school of the arts that we were able to absorb this school. And I do, however, have concerns about not wanting to have to do that again. So I definitely want to make sure that we really make a responsible decision around a school that can last. And if we have a school that can really sustain itself in a way, then that's something that I could kind of understand a little bit differently. So, yeah, that's just a concern for me. The only other question is SB 82. Can you clarify, if we terminate a charter, there is no penalty?
As part of Senate Bill 82 or any other current legislation, there is not a penalty.
The impact of declining enrollment, we already know, and Mr. Patrick Burke has shared with us some very compelling data related to declining enrollment. Can you share specifically any information related to what that impact would look like with a new school and then we're already declining? How does that impact financially our school system? And in particular, when we know that the the dollar follows the child. So then we already have some schools that don't have booster clubs, don't have PTAs or really active, robust LSCs. And so my concern is if there's an absence of extra funding, like things like the community gathering and providing other extra supports, that school will get less money. So I guess, can you share a little bit more about the impact of that as well?
I would defer to Chief Burke or Chief Mallard on that.
Mr. Burke, I think you probably want to talk about the other piece, but in terms of funding, extra program funding is really subjective. It's not something that we can control. It's not in our purview. Certainly, as I said, they're entitled to all of the federal, state, and local funding that any other, including SPLOST funding, charter schools are entitled to. They would be able to get technology. So they cannot be treated any less favorably than our regular GCPS schools. But certainly anything that's subjective would be diverted there, yes.
Obviously, the student follows the charter, so if it's reducing enrollment of our traditional schools, there are implications for points earned. So in the current allotment formulas, that would be impacted.
So we have schools already impacted by decrease in funding, and that will be further impacted by opening up a charter school. in an area that's already in need, in an area that's already struggling with transportation, in an area that right now, even with summer school, some people can't even get to summer school right now because they don't have the transportation. Like, hey.
I do have a follow-up question, just to revisit North Metro Academy. Can you share why they closed down? Was it did they have issues with getting the student count? Was it a transportation issue? Can you share more information there?
My understanding, and again, I was not with GCPS at the time, that it had to do with student attendance, safety and security issues, and missing some academic student achievement benchmarks. That was my understanding.
So it wasn't a transportation issue, and the kids had to, the families had to get themselves there?
I don't believe North Metro provided transportation, but, and so that could be correlated with the student attendance issues they were having.
But we don't see those issues with New Life. I know they're two different entities, though, but New Life seems to be thriving. And those families provide transportation. What cluster is that entity located?
That is in the Duluth cluster.
It is in Duluth. Okay, thank you.
And I'm very familiar with New Life. I think it's a great school. I know some students who went there. So really an excellent opportunity for the families who have the privilege to be able to provide the transportation to get their kids there. And so I think that's great. And I guess my concern is more around how do we continue to build and strengthen the schools that we have existing in GCPS? How do we use our leadership and leverage our skills to get more funding and updating the QBE formula? Like, how do we strategically, systemically, like, work with our legislators to focus more on, instead of a penalty at SB 82 around if we deny, our Swiss waiver would be taken away from us, and then an incentive to, if we say yes, we get money. Like, that is, to me, problematic in itself. And then when you look at the co-signers of the bill and the people who sponsored the bill, I'd have some larger concerns around, again, the systemic defunding and reallocation of support for public education. So that's something that is interesting to me. But thank you so much. I don't know if any other board members have any other questions, comments. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. White and Dr. Cody. We will now have Miranda McLaren, Executive Director of Accountability and Assessment, provide our second update.
Good evening, Dr. Therese, Chairperson, Dr. Taylor, and members of the board. I stand before you tonight to bring a district assessment update as a follow-up to some of the weekly updates that I've given you since May, when we knew that this was a topic of interest. Before we dive into district assessments, I want to talk about assessments as a whole. And we have some big buckets and ways that we can categorize assessments into state-required things that we have to do. We're all familiar with milestones. District assessments, which is what we're here to talk about, the district required. Program assessments. Some of our students who are in our special programs have assessments tied to those. And then we have, of course, our college and career readiness assessments for our high school students and some of our middle school students. The chart here takes the previous chart and adds in a column with students. Who are the students who participate in each of those assessments? So we've got the grade levels there so that you can see those pieces and kind of get an idea for impact of those assessments on different student groups. But the reason we're here, district assessments. We're going to start with how do we develop an assessment? And this is our district assessment development cycle. We give district assessments in grades 3 through high school, And the 4 core areas, English, math, science, social studies. And high school, of course, depends on what course you're enrolled in. But every assessment begins with a blueprint. What are the standards that have been taught in this instructional period, and which ones are we going to assess, and how are we going to assess those? Here you'll see that ALT creates the assessment. ALT stands for Assessment Leadership Team. We'll talk about that on the next slide in depth. But those are GCPS teachers who are trained to develop assessments. They create the assessment, we review the assessment, we have a different group of teachers come in and look at the assessments and make sure everything is ready to go before we actually administer the assessments. And it doesn't stop there. After the assessment, students get feedback about standards that they did or did not do well on. They get a grade, of course. And then my team goes into data review. We look at the items and the item statistics to determine how did this item perform? Was it too hard? Was it too easy? Was it just right? Do we need to keep the item as it is? Do we need to revise the item? Do we need to completely throw this item out and start again? And then we go back to the blueprint for the next assessment development cycle. So, those teachers that we train every year, our assessment leadership team, here's a training overview, and we actually do 2 cohorts every year, a cohort in the fall and a cohort in the spring. And we've been doing this for a little bit. We just finished cohort 18 in spring of 2026, and we're looking forward to inviting cohort 19 this fall. Teachers are nominated by their principals and then come into the training. Like I said, it's a full semester commitment. You see the 5 sessions here and the topics that we go into with teachers. After they complete assessment leadership team training, then they are invited to participate in the development of those assessments. And right now we are in high development season. The teachers who aren't teaching summer school are coming in and working on assessments, and my team is trying to get them and get everything done that we can while they have time in their schedules. But not only do the teachers who participate in assessment leadership team get that experience of developing assessments, they also take that professional learning back with them into their classrooms, because now they understand how they can write better short-term assessments for their students. And we know from our experience that teacher preparation programs have some assessment literacy, but not a lot. And my team sees part of our charge as developing that assessment professional learning in our teachers through ALT, but then also through our school leaders. Every year in the fall, we offer, we call it admin cohort for short. The long name is Leading and Monitoring Common Assessment Development to assistant principals and principals, so that they can oversee that assessment cycle in their building. And then each year we also partner with schools for school site training, where we will have a meeting with a principal and some assistant principals and say, what is it from this menu that we're showing you here that your teachers need? How can we come in and support assessment as a part of curriculum and instruction in your buildings? So with that, there is a little history lesson here of what we've been doing with the district assessments since the pandemic. We all know how that has impacted everything, and in March of 2020, we suspended end of year and semester testing when the students were at home. As we launched the 2021 school year, we knew that we needed to do something different. We didn't want to do district assessments. Those are given at 9-week marks. So using items that we had available to us, we put together common unit assessments. So teachers could give those shorter cycle assessments to students, whether they were involved in in-person learning or concurrently learning digitally at home. So those common unit assessments came onto the scene that school year. In 21-22, we all came back to school and we returned to district assessments each 9 weeks. 22-23, we had a moment and we thought the pandemic impacted the kids more than we really thought, and we shouldn't have just gone right back to district assessments. So we used common formative assessments to give teachers time to give these, again, shorter cycle assessments, but there was a window. You could give it in week 8 or week 9 or week 10 when your students had really, you had been able to teach the content and you thought your students were ready. We still held teachers and students to the December, we've got to have a semester kind of finished in December, because in the spring, milestones comes. We gave milestones benchmarks that year to try to figure out and gauge where the students were. And then we felt like for 23-24, okay, we paused, we slowed down, we let teachers teach at a slower pace. We've got to go back to our district assessments every 9 weeks. We also had new math standards in 23-24. And as we came back and looked at everything, we really implemented iReady universal screeners 3 times a year then, and so we thought, we don't really need to test our kindergarten, first and second grade students in math and ELA the way we had been with district assessments. So we pulled those back and said, let's use iReady instead and give those early scholars time to learn the content and leverage things that we already have. We removed ELA assessments because we introduced the EL education, and they had embedded assessments, and we were trying not to over-test kids. If they've just taken an EL education assessment, they don't need another district assessment on top of that. And so that was part of our rationale for trying to pull things back. I forgot to mention the previous year in 22-23, when we got to May, we pulled back district assessments if the student had just taken milestones. It seemed really silly and redundant for a student who's in 4th grade and just took the state end of grade math test to have to follow up with a district math test. You've shown us what you can do on the state tests. So we've been trying to pull things back and remove redundancy, because I know nobody's favorite time of year is testing season. 24-25, we were able to just go with, okay, we're going to continue what we did in 23-24. And this year, 25-26, we mostly did, but we had new ELA standards. And so we had to redevelop ELA assessments to align to those new state standards to get ready for milestones this spring. We also had a moment where we thought, you know what, let's think about rigor and length of assessments. So we started with a shorter assessment in September with less rigorous, easier questions. Moving to December with a longer assessment, slightly longer, little harder questions. Moving them to March, where we were at a cumulative assessment that was from the first week of school to March. And what have the students forgotten from first semester that we need to cycle back to? So we did these cumulative assessments. For 26-27, we are preparing to just kind of, if I were to fill out the timeline, you would see maintain district assessment system. No big changes really planned for 26-27. So let's think about this current student experience for a 4th grader. The big boxes are each month, and they're the assessments that I listed on the first 2 slides, with white font denoting something that the state requires, black font denoting something that we require as a district. The through line there are teacher-created assessments. Teachers have some other questions they need answered about student achievement and student understanding, and that can be unit tests, chapter tests, it can be a ticket out the door. There are all different ways that teachers assess their students and student learning for the day. If a student has a score on iReady that triggers us to do further tested for gifted identification, that can happen in August. It can happen in January. It wouldn't happen at the end of the year when we do that, but we would kind of look for those students. And we've increased our gifted identification due to the universal screeners being given in grades K-8. In this example, This student receives multilingual learner program services, and so they participate in Access in January or February when their school gives Access. There's a big window that the state gives for that. And this fourth grader participates in Gwinnett Writes. So I wanted to talk about that just for a minute. Gwinnett Writes is a district assessment. It takes the place of the Gateway assessment system that we phased out with the pandemic. Gateway was a graduation requirement. It was a writing assessment. But we began to think differently about writing, and writing shouldn't be a one and done activity. Writing is something that grows over time. And we move from writing and learning to write our letters, learning to write words, to writing to learn and really express ourselves and our ideas. Then, as the DOE was working on the new ELA standards, they shared with us that for milestones starting this past spring, they were only going to assess writing in grades 3, 5, 8, and the high school Lit and Comp 2 class. And as a former high school ELA teacher, that hurt my heart a little bit, and I thought kids can't have this big gap in writing and writing assessment. They've got to have something in there. And so it made sense for us to fill the gap with Gwinnett Writes in those years that the state is not going to do a writing assessment. We have formative resources because, again, writing isn't one and done. You have to write all year. Those formative resources, I show you the years that we introduced those because this was a big endeavor and we couldn't just develop everything and throw everything out there at once. We phased in our approach, and the formative writing resources are things that align with the instructional calendars and pacing. It's a part of what the students are learning in science and social studies and language arts. It's not something standalone. It's not something different. And it gives kids a different way to be assessed other than a multiple choice assessment. So I mentioned science, social studies, and ELA. Gwinnett Writes allows students to choose their topic for their summative assessment. So kids who are really science kids can write about science topics, or a social studies topic, one of two social studies topics, or one of two ELA topics. So we give that student choice, and students do get a score back before the end of the year. They test in March, get their scores back end of April, 1st of May, and it's 5% of their course grade. So it doesn't have the weight that Gateway had. The other thing that we're very proud of that as we've developed this is that we have intentionally developed student score reports that give writing feedback. To be a better writer, practice these things so that parents know where their students are, teachers know where their students are, and students know what they can do to grow. And I know you didn't ask about Gwinnett Writes, but it is part of our district assessments and assessment system. And in the board briefings, several questions came up, so I thought I needed to give it some time tonight. So my team has tried to be very intentional over the years of listening to feedback, of asking the question, what's best for students? How do we advance student achievement? And as we were moving into January, February, we decided it was time to conduct an assessment system audit. We are partnering with the National Center for Assessment to help us, and here you kind of see our phased-in approach to what we're doing. Step one is happening this month and next month, virtual interviews with teachers and principals. We are going to seek family feedback, student feedback, and then, of course, feedback from school and district leaders as we try to make sense of what is best for students, what feedback do both our internal and external shareholders need, and how do we make sure that assessment has just the right touch and not a too heavy touch for students. With that, I stand ready for any questions or comments you all may have.
Board members, question, comment?
thank you for this presentation, and I really wanted to focus on the Gwinnett Rights because this is super, super important, and I love that the district is filling in the gaps of where the state is not taking action on in terms of the information that they're looking to gather. The question that I have is, can you elaborate a little bit more on the teacher resources that we provide in terms of how they are evaluating the material the students are producing? Because having students in the system, I know sometimes that can be very subjective. And I hear from my own students and I hear from other students that sometimes what they're getting from one teacher is not the same from other teachers. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what that looks like?
Sure. My team developed rubrics that we pulled from Milestones to be sure we were hitting all the Milestones writing standards. And we have both student-friendly, student-facing rubrics so that kids can go in and look at, did I do all the things that it asked me to do? And we have teacher rubrics. And we have some self-paced courses. The first few years, we did lots of like in-person training, just like with the district assessment team. If a school calls and says, will you please come do some rubric training with my teacher and inter-rater reliability so that there isn't such variance from teacher A to teacher B, we go out and work through that. So we're working on that training piece to reduce the variability.
And that's still ongoing? Does that happen often? And
Yes.
it's not like a one-and-done situation?
No, because we know we may go to a school and train, and the next year they have 3 new teachers, and so we may need to train again. And we always offer, like I said, the online courses for teachers to engage in and make sure that principals know, like, hey, this is here especially for your new teachers. And then we do some virtual but live training for those new teachers to try to help them.
Good, good. Thank you for sharing that. Can we back up just one slide?
Yeah.
So student experience grade 4. So a lot of chatter that I hear too is that we tend to sometimes overassess. And I hear it a lot from sometimes teachers, and of course students are always going to complain about assessments.
Yes.
Help me look at this, and I'll look at this is from a grade 4 student. Is this, are they throughout their year in school, August through May, is this 12 different assessments that they're navigating through?
Not quite 12, but maybe 12, could be more. So in August, everybody K-8 does iReady, math and reading,
Okay, including the 4th grader, okay.
including the 4th graders. In September, we don't have any tests, just teach. Give iReady and teach for a bit. And then in October, we do that check-in with district assessments, and that's basically 3 through high school. How are you doing at the end of the first 9 weeks? Are you showing mastery of those standards? Then you've got the rest of October, November, December, we check back in with the district assessments. January is iReady again, February, Gwinnett Rights, March, and yeah, the spring gets to be a lot. But there is some time in the fall where we don't have those assessments. And then, there are things that, chunks of time in there where it looks like there's something every month. Well, March, that's at the beginning of the month. Milestones at April is not until the end of the month. So there is some time in there.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a lot. It is.
I'm decided, you put it in a perspective, and I wanted to
Yes,
take
sir.
a deep dive into that. So,
Sure.
excellent, thank you. No, this, I definitely appreciate the explanation and you kind of showcasing the cycle and of course, talking, putting kind of labeling the students in the assessments is very helpful visually for me to see, how they all align in our system. So thank you for doing that. And
Sure.
No further questions.
A couple of things I really appreciated about your presentation was, one, how you built through the year, shorter, basic to little bit longer, intermediate to, and especially the fact that when you talked about that March district assessment, capturing those things that you need to review, right? See, a lot of this is not just measuring how the student's doing, it's measuring how the teacher's doing as well. And so, I really appreciated that. And I do appreciate the sensitivity because accountability is important as you prepare for life, right? And knowing where you stand and not being afraid to measure where you're at. And sometimes that means doing a little bit of hard work, which doesn't hurt anybody. But one of the things I was concerned about at the end of this year, I heard from a number of teachers, was in our district assessments. I mean, how the milestones are done is a state thing. Mm-hmm. But on our district assessments, are we doing things with technology the way it is, meta glasses and some of the different things? How are we approaching best practices for how we administer the assessments? Are we considering condensing all subject matter to a 1 or 2 day window instead of a 6 day window? Are we, all of those different things that go into, because at the end of the day, we're going to have people out there that are going to try to cheat the system. Mm-hmm. And what are we doing to make sure that because that could skew our results.
Right.
And we don't want skewed results. No. We want accuracy. So what are the things that we're doing, and does that fall under what you're doing?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. That is absolutely under my what my team does. So we shortened the windows this year for the interims. It used to be like a big 2-week window, and so you could kind of test wherever. And we shortened it to at most a 4-day window. We attempted to say math is on Monday, ELA is on Tuesday, science, and that gets into our high schools. It gets logistically difficult. And so I sat down with a principal and assistant principal, and I went, okay, I see what you're saying. So we didn't do that. I would love to be able to say, ELA is this chunk of time, everybody, everywhere, because then I can't share my answers with my friends. We have asked teachers to watch for meta glasses and just personal electronic devices. The meta glasses can be tricky because they can sneak past you, and we had a lot of conversation about, well, what if Mr. Knudsen shows up with his meta glasses and they have a prescription in them and he can't see the test? And I said, put some painter's tape over the lens. We try to stay one step ahead of the kids in the cheating. Unfortunately, cheating has been around as long as school has been around, and it's gone from, various methods. They're very sophisticated now. We ask the teachers to have the kids either put their personal electronic devices in their bags at the back of the room, make sure they're zipped up. Some teachers collect devices. Some kids have dummy devices, and they will give you the dummy device and they keep the real one. So we're trying our best, and that's all, and when a test is compromised, and tests are compromised, we send a notice out to the schools to say, hey, such and such test is compromised. Tell your teachers when they're giving that test to be extra vigilant in watching for cheating. And we're trying.
One other thing that was mentioned was the idea of then if you can't create, like you said, that specific block where you can control it all at the same time, is there a way to create different versions, same, and I'm sure, again, you all the experts, I'm just kind of passing on some of that feedback that I get, but there's different versions so that same content, different order, whatever, different.
Yep. And we scramble the test forms anyway so that what you see is not what Mr. Gasper sees.
Okay.
If y'all are sitting next to each other. We're going to talk with our technical advisory committee about AI and versioning. The problem then becomes we've got to be sure that psychometrically they are equitable forms, because McLaren got the easy form and I got the hard form. And if I had gotten the form that she got, my grade would have been higher. So we will work through that with our technical advisory committee, but it's absolutely something that we've been toying with. How do we do that? And how do we stay a step ahead of the kids?
Again, thanks for all your hard
Sure.
work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. Just a couple of questions. Ms. McLaren, do you all currently scramble the forms, and is that new, or have y'all been doing that for the duration?
We have been scrambling at least since 2023, if not before. I know since 2023.
And in my experience, school systems are not lacking in data. What's most important to me is how are we using the data to drive improvement, to drive student achievement. I'd love to hear more around how y'all are using the data, maybe for sake of time in particular as it relates to Georgia Rights. How is that data used to drive student achievement?
So with Gwinnett Rights, we have a dashboard that is available to schools so they can see their kind of trait scores and component scores and look at big picture, how are we doing with writing, student level, how are we doing with writing, and actually something that we are producing right now with the help of AI is trends and misconceptions for a school. So what are the trends we saw in student writing at this elementary school so that the teachers and school leaders can use that to inform what they might need to do differently the next year? So that's kind of our first step with Gwinnett Rights and how we're trying to use that. And then the student getting their student feedback to know on their student report, these are the things I can do to be a better writer, to move my we score on a rubric scale of 1 to 4. How do I move my 2 to a 3 or my 3 to a 4?
And then lastly, with our district being the size that it is it typical for the action around data to be decided upon at the school level? Is it cluster level? Is it district level? Just more insight around how we're acting on that data would be great.
Sure. So with milestones data, the directors in teaching and learning, as soon as they get there, are able to see milestones data, and especially not just a score, but a domain. They look at instructional calendars and pacing guides, and where did we maybe need to create some more mini lessons because students didn't do well on this domain, small group things. At the building level, of course, the principals are looking at the data to determine, do I have the right teacher teaching the right thing? Is there some professional learning that I need somebody to come support my fill in the, whatever grade team with this, or is it my science teachers that need some more support? And that's when my team can come in and help them kind of work through that. This past year, my team put together some assessment data actions, and it's basically a protocol for, okay, district assessment data is in, these are the reports to go pull, and these are the questions to ask about those reports. And then I know that, I can't really speak to all the details of what happens, but I know that the cluster superintendents meet with their principals in cluster groups and talk about data and talk about what they need to do next. So we're trying to be sure that we're looking at it at all levels. Because if students invest the time to take the assessment, we need to do something with the data, not just say, you made an 87, good job. You're welcome.
All right, thank you for your presentation. I have a few questions. If we can go to slide 7. I know that I've often heard from parents related to over-testing, and I see we have quite a bit of testing, and I also see where over time we've kind of looked at the removal of some of the assessments, and so I see in 2022, 2023, we removed the district assessment. Can you talk a little bit more around how years ago, we, of course, everything was testing, testing, testing. There was a strategic decision to reduce some of the testing.
Yes.
And now it looks like, the two slides I'm looking at, slides 7 and 8, it looks like there still quite a bit of testing, and including the teacher assessments, which I personally, I love that teachers can assess their kids. I think that's where they really see the learning and opportunity that's like not as much stress and high stakes. And so I'm just curious around, and I know we'll have data later this year. I think in October you'll share a little bit more data, but I'm curious around the teacher assessments versus the district assessments, because I also understand that when it's a high stakes or a stressful situation, that results could be impacted. And I'm wondering if the teacher's assessments that may seem a little bit more comfortable for the students, if they are higher, then that data may be a really strong data point to help really show progress. And I know teachers use that data to be able to then better customize or differentiate their learning for their students. So I guess if you could talk to how we've reduced the testing, and also if you can share information around any data you have or any observations related to teacher assessments versus the district high stakes assessments.
Sure. So we'll start with reduction. We strategically abandoned district assessments in May if the student had milestones. We didn't feel like there was a need for, milestones is essentially the final exam, and we didn't feel there was a need for another final exam. There had been, even prior to even this timeline, we would give pre-test, post-test, and we looked for that growth over time. So you had to give both of those assessments. But we weren't giving pre-tests anymore, so do I really need to give another algebra final? The kid just took an algebra final. The state says the algebra EOC has to be, at that time, 20% of the course grade. They've lowered it now to 10%. Why are we putting the student through that stress again? Haven't they demonstrated mastery? So that was part of our rationale behind what can we put off. I am a parent of a child with test anxiety, so I see it in my house, and so we see that. And I saw it as a teacher. I knew the kids who knew so much more than they could show me on a test. So we're trying to not overburden the kids, but find that right fit for informing instruction, giving good data. And I think that's where the teacher-created assessments come in. Sometimes they need to know a little bit more about what the kid is doing and showing in class. I always wonder what gap that teacher-created assessment is filling, and I know from a teacher what sometimes it fills. I don't have any data about teacher scores versus district scores. I'm not privy to grade books. I don't look at that data, but I think it's something certainly worth thinking about in our assessment audit, those teacher impressions of what they're doing in their classroom versus the utility of the district and state assessments.
Is there some standardization around the teacher assessments, formative or summative?
I couldn't say.
Excuse me, the guidance is always that our teachers are leveraging our AKS when they're creating their assessments, but we wouldn't necessarily, and that will be the standard across all of our schools. Now, if a teacher is using it for other purposes, we can identify that, but they are trained for the purposes of making sure their assessments line with the AKS.
Do the department chairs work together to create tests, right? And then, so there may be some data there that you could use around, so in addition to the teacher assessments that just from my own teaching experience, I find very valuable again, and I know many teachers do prefer that, and I wonder if there's some data that we can capture maybe in October that may be, if possible, in your audit or even in a future report, really sharing where that standardization is, looking at the data related to that, because I think what that'll capture is, it'll capture kind of the nuance related to high-stakes tests and the stress, anxiety related to that. And then it may also answer some questions around, are we over-testing, or is there true value in maybe the closeness of some of the tests? So maybe thinking about that. And I don't know, because I don't have the data in front of me. I just think it's just something that I'm curious about.
And there are common assessments, and that's kind of what that school leader is. A lot of the common planning groups will plan an assessment together for a smaller unit assessment. You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. McLaren. We will now have George Gomez, Chief of Staff, provide the legislative and policy update. Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Today, we only have one policy that we're bringing to you. Just as a matter of context, if you will recall, back in May 2025, Governor Kemp signed into law House Bill 340. That bill was the bill that created a requirement for K-8 not to have Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's your saying. I'm sorry. That was the bill that created the law that required K-8 not to have cell phones in the schools. When that bill was passed, there was a requirement that in January 2026, systems developed a policy. You will recall that we did that, policy JCDAF, right, Eric? Okay, policy JCDAF was created, and that policy that we already have already stipulated that in our schools, K-8, cell phones were not to be used. We were waiting, as you know, for the governor to do what he was going to do or not do for high school. So we were waiting to align policy JCDAF with our discipline policy JCD. The governor, the General Assembly did pass a new law that would get into effect in another year or so, but it was time to align JCDAF with JCD. So today, for Thursday, what we're bringing to you is the changes to policy JCD. We're incorporating the language of the law and incorporating the language of JCDAF into policy JCD. Remember that I think a month ago, we made a commitment to hold back on policies unless, if you remember, if you look at that, unless they were compliant in nature. And this is a compliance policy because it's rooted in a law. So we will be bringing that to you Thursday. We will be asking that you do not follow your normal protocol in laying on the table for 30 days. We will be asking you to approve that policy on Thursday evening. That's what I have, but stand ready for any questions.
Just one question. I don't see included in the updates to JCDE mention around expectations on the bus. Can you provide any insight there?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Thigpen.
Thank you. The law states that it is not required for them not to use it, but it's highly discouraged from them using it on the bus. So this policy, JCDAF, as well as JCD that we're implementing, talks about bell-to-bell instruction only, where the cell phones are banned. It's from bell-to-bell instruction.
So just for clarity, it's the district stance that restriction on the bus is not something that you all support at this time?
That is correct. We will not be providing any consequences of nature at all for students that are using them on the bus. They're discouraged from using them on the bus, but there will be no consequence, and we're not providing any type of prohibition from them using them on the bus, just discouragement.
Have you collected data or feedback in the past that could provide any type of clarity around if cell phones have created disciplinary issues on the bus? And if so, to what degree? I'm assuming not much because you all don't feel that it's needed, but do you have any feedback there?
In talking with individuals, in particular, students or parents, as well as bus drivers, from time to time, the concerns do arise, but there's no overwhelming swell of concerns around that from a safety standpoint. And so we feel like the way that the state has actually addressed this issue is sufficient for us at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So the question I have is around policy JCD and policy JCDF. We have duplicate language in this policy? So we have duplicate language in this policy. So for example, policy JCDF, language is included in here, but policy JCDF is still in existence, correct?
Correct.
So we have two policies with similar language, or the
Sure.
same language.
Policy JCD spells out the student code of conduct for us, so it's important to put it in there. And policy JCDAF was a requirement in law, so that's
Okay.
why the language is there.
This is just an example, though. I just wanted to clarify of how we do have some policies, and we've had discussions about this as a board that has duplicate language for various reasons. And
Yes.
I get it. And so again, calling out that this is an example of a policy that already has existing language in another policy. I think that is good because it does help to ensure that there's understanding. If you only have access to one policy and you're reading that, you have a clear, fully understandable context around it. So I wanted to just kind of clarify that. And the other thing is, I also have a wondering around this policy in terms of how the discipline would vary. And so I have a concern related to maybe how we are executing on this policy and what that could look like how are we really measuring the execution of this from one school to another school where there may be some leniency based on, the leadership versus another school. So how are we measuring that?
Mr. Thigpen, I don't want to speak on your behalf, and I'm sorry that Mr. Nebo's not here. It's my understanding. And again, I could be.
Yeah, I can speak to that a
Okay.
little bit more. Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
thank you.
Gomez. And so just recently, as a couple of weeks ago, we've met with several principals, and we've come up with a discipline guide as it relates to this policy to help schools set parameters on what best practices would be to issue out consequences when necessary. Those steps also start with some local school opportunities to have some PBIs reminders, some morning announcement reminders, just to really have a grace period to make sure our students are acclimated to this new policy. But then beyond that, there are some district procedures and consequences that will go along with it. Some of those consequences start with administrative conferences all the way to some in-school or out-of-school suspension opportunities as well, based on the number of times that a student may have been in violation. But we're certainly having conversations with principals about, making sure our staff members are trained on how to handle these situations as well if a student does have a cell phone violation or personal electronic device violation. But we're really trying to make sure that the consequences are consistent across the district, so one school doesn't look like their consequences are different from another school, for sure.
So in our data currently, in our discipline data, we have disproportionality, and predominantly with Black and Hispanic students being disproportionately impacted by discipline consequences for similar same infractions. So the concern here would be the need to continue to examine the data related to this because we already see it existing, and I'm wondering if this now creates another, opportunity where, in a bad way, where, our kids will be further impacted and disproportionately. And so that's just a concern there. So I would just continue to caution in how we're looking at the data and how we're addressing it, because of course the execution of this policy and how it'll impact our schools would be a major concern as we
Yes, ma'am.
continue to.
Yeah, and
look at
a big piece of it as well is we're trying to get as much parental involvement as possible as well. There'll be some personal electronic device contract opportunities for parents to be involved as well as part of this process. So again, that everybody's on the same page. as the message goes out as this new policy comes into play as well. So hopefully that'll help support it as well.
And what does that grace period look like?
It's not necessarily a period per se, but just saying, hey, this first semester, let's really make sure that we are, teaching the expectation more so than, punishing the consequence for if a student does bring a personal electronic device.
Thank you.
Okay, well, for sake of time, if you have questions on you have some time for your governance team discussion. If you have questions on any of the business meeting agenda items, if you just send those to me maybe over the next couple of days, let's see if we can get you answers prior to. For the July 14th work session, this of course will be Dr. Straja's first. So I'll work with her on in terms of what that presentation looks like. But obviously, if you have feedback in terms of something that you want to see, please share it with me and or with her, and we'll get something scheduled. And then the final piece before I turn it over is just as a reminder that on July 27th, we will have the fiscal year 2027 millage rate hearings, the first at 11 a.m. and the second one will be at 6 p.m. that day.
Are you also, when you talk to Dr. Strayer around the work session, I know she had asked us about holding off on our policies that we've been pending, so it's like for 3 months we've been waiting on, our policies. So I wonder if there's a conversation y'all can have around
we can
where
definitely,
okay, thank you.
definitely do that.
Do you recall what the topic of our session was last July?
We had that. What we had down was I'm sorry, for last July?
Yeah, last July.
Was,
I'm
trying to remember. It was
Okay,
attendance and discipline.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
All right, now it's time for us to have our governance team discussion. The first thing I wanted to focus on is we all participated in interviews with ARS, AIR, and ERG. And I appreciate all of the time that you all took to be able to really interview the candidate firms. And I thought, even watching the interviews, I thought that was really helpful also for me. And so I want to just kind of open up the floor for a conversation on which firm do you all which firm are you leaning for and for a possible vote on Thursday. So I want to just open that up for you all to kind of share your thoughts and comments around that.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Really enjoyed learning more about both firms. It's very helpful. Also appreciate the team and the intentionality around the questions and the entire process. At this time, I support moving forward with ERS.
I still have to finish going through the ERS interview. I did participate in the AIR, and I felt like they were definitely capable. And as I mentioned, even when we did the first reduction of candidates, I appreciate AIR's previous experience with Gwinnett, their familiarity with Gwinnett, and the fact that they're right here working collaboratively with Georgia State from a research perspective. But I need to, over the next 48 hours, look at the ERS and make a final decision.
Steve, just so you, and you may already know this, but there are 3 videos for each provider.
No, but I'll figure out how to get that.
Yeah, this was actually a really good exercise, and I think having participated in watching, of course, being being on the live version, and then of course watching the videos, my first choice was always AIR, and reading through all the materials that we got, I'm still leaning towards supporting ARR, but I still want to go back and do a little more in-depth research. But I think that's kind of where I'm leaning right now is with ARR.
Yeah, I still have some videos to get through as well. Just for transparency, we conducted 3 interviews with each provider, so we had an opportunity to meet each team 3 times, which I think was very helpful. And I appreciate you, Chair Therese Morgan, for setting that up and orchestrating it the way that you did. It's very helpful. Right now, based upon the interviews I have participated in and had a chance to watch the videos I had a chance to watch, I am leaning toward ERS. I really appreciated the fact that they, similar to AIR, have worked with Gwinnett County, not even just Gwinnett County in the past, but with other surrounding districts as well as other large districts across the country. And I love the fact that they are willing and able to provide some comparison points to other districts of our size. It's hard to really get a true sense of, where we're thriving and can do better if we're just comparing ourselves to Georgia, because we're the largest district in Georgia. So I appreciate that they have worked with, I think they said 25 of the 50 largest districts in the country, and can bring that insight and expertise to the work here in Gwinnett. I also am just really excited about the equity framework that they presented, that they would be using to conduct the audit. I know oftentimes people maybe have varying understandings of what equity means and how to define it. So I appreciate that they have already come into the work helping to contextualize what equity looks like, feels like, how they've defined it in the work that they do, but also making it clear that there are partners in the work and they're looking to be thought partners and to work alongside us, not to do the work for us, not to give us the answers, but to work with us to help us to derive at what's going to be best for GCPS. Other than that, I love that they emphasize the importance of being able to communicate and bring the community along as it pertains to change management. I think a lot of times when districts embark upon work, there's not always intentionality around bringing the community along and managing the change. So I love the fact that they elevated that as something that is going to be of importance as we think through how to communicate once we get the data, right? Once we get the reports, what are we going to do with it? What's the action? And that's going to really require some strategy, some change management, some thought partnership, and bringing our community along. So I look forward to reviewing the rest of the videos, but as of today, I do look to support ERS. Thank you.
Thank you all for your feedback. I definitely appreciated seeing the interviews, and the feedback that I have is really related to which firm to me really exemplified our core beliefs and commitments. And so I kind of, from that framework, I thought about, ERS as more focused on the student, emphasizing more around the student experience. So that was pretty partial to that. So I really, really love that. And so they also talked about understanding the experience of students across different schools, not just the data, but really engaging in their voices and engaging with student groups as well. I like their dimensions of resource equity. It was a framework that they developed, and I really appreciated that. And I also recognize that they also have experience with GCPS. So both of them, AIR and ERS, both have experience with GCPS, and I think that local context is also helpful. And they already have some type of baseline for how we've, and if I'm not mistaken, it was in 2020. ERS was 2022 or something. And they provided some recommendations already around equity. I'm not sure how we've implemented them. I think we do have an opportunity to kind of further look at what they've already done and then build on that. I like their root cause analysis framework, and the stakeholder engagement was really important to me. As we know, as when we engaged in our superintendent search process, it was quite a bit focused on stakeholder engagement and feedback, so I like that. They shared some examples about how to navigate some difficult decisions, kind of like Dr. Simmons, what you're saying around like really engaging what it is and what it isn't. And I think for some people, they may need some more support around really learning and understanding what equity is and how it's executed, and that it's not just for one group of students, that it's for each and every, truly, how are we meeting the needs of all of our students, addressing schools regardless of where they're located. Schools in the north may have very different needs than schools in southern Gwinnett, and how do we address both of those needs in different ways? I really like that consciousness around that. That was really appreciated. So yeah, I like ERS.
One request is if the district can provide us with the work previously conducted by ERS, as well as AIR, if you can put your fingers on it, so that we can have that as another consideration in making our final decision. And then, in addition to that, if we do decide to move forward with ERS, I think it is pertinent that our board look at the information they've already provided in a report, or if we go with AIR, consider the work that's already been done and how we can build upon that work.
Were you going to say something about that?
Only that, yes, we'd be researching it for you and getting back if we do have information.
Yeah, if you could send it to
share.
all the board members, the ERS and AR,
Yeah.
that would be great. Whoever. Yeah. Great. All right. The other thing is, okay, so thank you. I hope you all continue to review it, and we'll have it on our agenda for us to make a decision on Thursday. The next thing is our Dr. Estrella starting in July, and we've had discussions where she's requested a consideration for us to meet twice a quarter instead of once a quarter. So our training is typically once a quarter, and so now our board sessions during the transition phase will be twice a quarter. So Lisa's going to send an email, if you haven't already sent the email. Okay, she already sent it. Okay, great. So if y'all could just reply to the email on your availability so that we can kind of get it already on the schedule and start planning. But primarily, the sessions will be focused on Dr. Estrella sharing information with the board. It's more touch points around this really kind of high stakes process around transition. And so this is where she'll be sharing and communicating quite a bit with us around that time, since we're not technically, we're not on that transition as a superintendent project that we'll be, as a board, just getting information and updates on. And then I know that she's also engaging with inviting community members. So we, as a board, provided her with names of people to consider. Ultimately, Dr. Estrella will come up with a list with her and her team of people who will be involved in that transition process. It will be a group of people in the community, families, teachers, community members. And so I'm really excited about her process around engaging the transition and making sure that that's also including stakeholder voice. So it's not just Dr. Estrella making decisions, but it's really a collaborative effort with executive staff here in GCPS, as well as community members and the board, of course. I think that's it. That's all I have.
Teresa, has she made a decision on who she wants as part of her community member voice and leadership voice from here in Gwinnett? Based on the recommendations that we submitted?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
You
Sorry to
know,
put you on the spot.
I know she's
I didn't-
no. I know she's doing it. I just
Okay.
don't know like what the decision. I don't know what decision she's made around it, but I know she's meeting with the transition team, well, the organization she's working with, and I know they're meeting and having discussions, but I don't actually know who is on it and what decisions she's made. I think she's going to share that with us in July, and once she comes, so we'll have that information. But she's right now toggling between closing out her superintendency at one school district and kind of not fully here yet. And I think she just wants to take some time around really focusing when she gets here on that. So, oh, and she was attending graduations this week, so, yeah. But I'm sure we'll get the list soon, but I do know that she's, did mention to us that she wanted to make sure it's inclusive, and to all of us, she said that she wanted it to be inclusive of community voices, and I'm excited about that external engagement.
Therese, did you, I know we talked about this, but I wasn't sure if the decision was made to ask board members to submit additional names for the team. I can't remember where that conversation landed.
Yeah, she said she didn't need any more. That was the follow-up. Board members provided names, 2 members, 2 people each, and she's gonna take whatever they. And I think the other question is once she has the transition team, that information, I think it's like a 100-day plan, Doctor. I think it's like a 100-day plan will be done in like December, if I'm not mistaken. And then that information will feed into her strategic plan. That'll still be a very collaborative process too. And I'm not sure how long that is going to take, but that also is going to take quite a bit of time where the transition plan then feeds into the strategic plan. That'll also be inclusive and engaging community. And staff, of course, here. Okay. I think that's it. Anything else? Okay. Well, 7:54. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening. Thank you all for your time and great presentations today from the staff. We really appreciate all of the effort and research and you all presenting to us, and all the people who did not present to us and who did all the background work. We also appreciate you all, so thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And forward.